What's going on, guys? Reisshub back with another video, and in this video I'm going to be going through everything you need to know about getting eliminations in stacked moving endgames. All of the data for this video was taken from the day 1 of the solo FNCS qualifiers, and this was from round 3, game 1. This game had a 45-man moving zone, and I broke down every single element of every single kill and put them into a table so that we can figure out some trends that you can use into your own gameplay when playing really stacked games like this. I do wish I was able to get more than one game recorded for this and put all the data in, but in all honesty, it took so long to do it that I just didn't have time to do more games. In the future, I'll be doing something similar on how to do this in non-stacked games, and obviously I'll be able to get a lot more data from this because each game is much less time consuming to record. Okay, so which weapons were most commonly used to get eliminations in these endgames? 75% of the eliminations in this game came from the shotguns, so both tack and charge combined, with the AR only taking up 11.1% of the kills, so that was only 5 elims in this game. Two things to note about this is that almost no one was running SMG and there was 0 SMG eliminations in this game, and when one player started the fight with a charge shot and then switched to their AR, I also included this within the charge shotgun rate, purely because this was a more shotgun based kill than it was AR. When I say that 11.1% of the kills were from an AR, I just purely mean 100% AR kills. So based on this, what kind of spacing and distances are you going to be from your opponents to get your kills? Well, 37.8% of the eliminations were in the same box or within one tile space. Around 2/3 of these were from the tack, and about 1/3 of these were from charge eliminations. This shows that players who have the tack are way more often just jumping into the box to ensure that they get their eliminations in the endgame, rather than being careful and keeping one tile spacing between, which is what you would normally expect from a usual box fighting playstyle. However, when we look at the data from players who were one tile away rather than in the same tile or in the same box, we can see that the data flips, and 2/3 of the eliminations are done with the charge shotgun and 1/3 is done with the tack shotgun. So keeping in mind that 65% of all of the eliminations in the moving zones were done within either the same box or one tile distance, how should you apply this information? Well, if you're a charge player, typically you're going to be using more of a box fighting playstyle, taking walls and keeping your spacing between them to ensure that the tack players don't run in your box and get the eliminations on you. On the flip side of that, if you're a tack player, you're probably better off getting inside someone's box or getting in really close spacing between them, as your tack is just not going to do enough damage from 1 or 2 tiles away to win against charge players in the endgame. So as always, you need to ensure that your mechanics for wall replacing and putting cones in people's boxes and also just phasing in is down to a T, and on top of that you need to ensure that your aim is as good as it possibly can, because if you're going to be taking 50-50s with attack in an endgame, you better have good aim and you better be winning those fights. So what's the easiest way to actually be looking out for these eliminations in the endgame? So one of the most blaringly obvious statistics that came out of all of this research was that 73.3% of the eliminations were from players on the same level as the player who won the fight. Usually there's a load of players who get ahead of the zone and then open up their floor and look for the eliminations of the players below them, but in all honesty, this just really was not a consistent strategy that worked at all. Only 8.9% of eliminations happened from players who were below them, and if this is the only way that you're looking for eliminations in the endgame, you really should start to rethink your strategy. So when I break down those 33 eliminations into how the player peaked in order to get the shots off on the opponent, a lot of the times, obviously as we said earlier, it was just players getting inside the box, having 13 eliminations out of the 33 being players who got inside the opponent's box and got the elimination this way. Outside of this, I was actually quite surprised to see the low amount of safe peeks that were taken, as a lot of the players weren't doing peanut butter peeks or window peeks or anything like that. 16 of these 33 eliminations were from players either just in the open, obviously scuffed players in the endgame and stuff like that with low mats, they're just running through old builds, or they're just doing large wall edits so they had a large space open to take shots on their opponents. Another thing that I should note is that there was 0 eliminations in this endgame from players who did the stair wall tarp, usually because there's not enough space for you to edit and actually get clean shots off and stay protected at this time, so the majority of eliminations were from players who were in full boxes. This doesn't mean that you shouldn't floor stair tarp by any means, that's not what I'm trying to say, but what I'm trying to say is if you're going to then go for eliminations, you should actually do a full box at the end of it and use that to peek out of. So when should you go for your eliminations? Well, you can see here the distribution of when these eliminations happened in these zones. So you can see obviously the highest amount of eliminations was in the end in the 4th moving zone here, because a lot of the players are crammed together, and the lowest amount of eliminations are in the 1st and 3rd moving. Now I think the 3rd moving having the tied lowest eliminations isn't actually anything to do with players not going for elims here. I think this is actually just a coincidence because I'm purely just using this data from one game. However, what we can take from this is that the 1st moving zone is really the time when you don't want to be focusing on eliminations that much, if you don't need one. Your main focus here should just be rotating and getting into the 6th zone, and then into the 2nd moving, and then if you need an elimination, that's when you need to start planning on getting one. Obviously, you should be opportunistic about your eliminations still. I'm not saying don't get any in this time, because the majority of the eliminations here were opportunistic elims. Either from players getting ahead and then spraying back, or actually what was quite common here is that when players were landing from their launch pads, they landed in a box of an opponent and went for an elimination this way. All of these players, by the way, were tack players. So if you've used your launch pad to get through first moving, or reused one at this point, so you're flying through the air, you have attack, you have good HP, and you don't have many mats, you really need an impact frag here, you may consider landing in someone's box at this point. Okay, so that's first moving, but what about the later zones? When should you go for an elimination here? Well, when looking at the data from distance of 0 to 1 tile, so either in box or only one distance apart, the average builds that people had when they went for this elimination was 29. Around 30 builds is actually the recommendation that I'd been giving people anyway in Endgame, because at this point, you have enough mats to fight people in the endgame, and also if you mess up the fight and the opponent gets away, you still have enough builds to keep you rotating and get you ahead a little bit more. So if you get into a really awkward situation, you still have plenty of mats to get out. If you wait until you have 5 to 10 builds left, you try to fight someone, chances are you may not have enough mats to finish the fight and get away from it, and this might be the end of your game here. Hope you guys enjoyed this video and learned a lot. I've got a bunch of content coming up soon and a bunch on Twitch as well, as we're doing viewing parties for the grand finals right now. Hope you guys learned a lot and enjoyed. I will catch you guys later. See you.